Hello, fellow cyborgs, and welcome to the BookBuddyAthon wrap-up. I did this BookBuddyAthon with Acacia Ives as always, and I am about to talk about the books that I managed to read and not read. My readathon got off to a bit of a slow start. I didn't end up finishing War and Peace before the readathon, so I spent the first half of the first day of the readathon finishing that up. So in consequence, there was no way I was going to get to either of these. Three Tall Women by Edward Albee, which is a play, and finishing up Ordinary Light by Tracy K. Smith. These weren't priority reads for me for the readathon. I was much more invested in reading the novels, so I didn't get to these at all during the week. But I will tell you what I did get to. Acacia and I buddy read Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This was her second reread, and this was the first time I had read this. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I think that Sarah Waters is just going to be a 3 out of 5 star author for me, and it's nothing that she's done wrong per se, but I've just found that her characters and or just in general her novels just don't resonate with me. I recognize that the writing was great, the historical time period was well represented. I loved the lesbian characters in here. I loved having that sort of element to a historical novel. I thought that things were well represented, people, places, experiences, but for some reason I just didn't love this. I didn't even really like it. I just liked it. I think one of the other things about Fingersmith is that there are a couple twists and turns in here, but if you know that going in, which I did, I was prepared for them, so I was not as surprised and my mind wasn't as blown as Acacia's was and why she wanted to read it with someone. So I'm afraid I spoiled that buddy read experience with her a little bit by not being quite so surprised when twists happened, but it was, as always, great to chat about this with Acacia. One of the things that both of us kind of talked about is we didn't really believe the romance, which, the romance isn't the main part of this story, but it is a huge subplot, so if that's not believable for you, then that's going to be a bit of a hindrance to your liking. But in any case, I will probably read Sarah Waters in the future, but just not expecting to love what I read, and I'm really glad that I did give this a try. Next up is The Lightkeepers by Abby Genai. This I did manage to finish throughout that week of reading. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed this so much more than Fingersmith, and I enjoyed it probably at the same level I thought I would. One of the things about this is that it is darker than I was expecting, but also was more hopeful than a lot of books that cover material this dark are. So in this, there's a trigger warning for rape. Like right out, I will let you know about that because when I was reading this in the first, I don't know how many pages, I was thinking, oh, my mom would probably need to read this. This is awesome. I really loved the writing style. I really loved the psychology. I loved how we got to learn about the natural world, but written in a poetic manner. But then the rape happened and I was like, never mind, mom's not going to be reading this because my mom doesn't do dark stuff like that. But like I said before, I alluded to before, as dark as this novel gets at times, the way that it's written and our narrator's point of view never gives in to despair. So this is not an unrelentingly dark read by any means, which is just awesome. If I've moved slightly, sorry, I had to say hello to someone who came home. So anyway, The Lightkeepers. So while this goes really dark, the writing style is beautiful and the characters and the narrative never gives into despair. A lot of really bad stuff happens in here, but it was a relatively quick read. It was a relatively easy read as far as the writing style and as far as giving me mental breaks from the awful things that were happening. And this book really made me want to read more books about animals. It was fascinating and beautiful to read about the sharks and the whales and the seals and even those evil seagulls. God, I hate them. So anyway, I really enjoyed reading this. I am so looking forward to eventually trying Abby Genai's short story collection, and I hope that if you are at all interested in picking this up, that you do so, and I hope that you love it. And finally, I started but did not finish The Clay Girl by Heather Tucker. I believe I got to like page 91 during the readathon. At the moment, I am on page about 200. Who knows what page I'll be on by the time you see this. So I wanted to read The Clay Girl, just like I wanted to read The Lightkeepers, because they are two of Acacia's favorite books of all time. The Clay Girl is in fact her favorite book of 2016, if I remember correctly. I am so grateful that Acacia talked about The Clay Girl and really pushed me to pick up a copy, and because of this BookBuddyAthon, I picked it up because I have not heard anyone else talk about it on BookTube before Acacia did. And if Acacia didn't read this book and she didn't talk about it, she didn't give it rave reviews, hold a giveaway on her channel, then I don't think anyone would be talking about or reading The Clay Girl right now. So thank you very much, Acacia, for bringing this to the BookTube community. I appreciate it. So this is similar to The Lightkeepers for me in that it is full of a lot of dark, awful topics, but the way that it's written never gives over to despair, and it keeps it a little bit lighter. Ari is our main character who has an imaginary seahorse friend. She's growing up in the 1960s in Eastern Canada, and she has a very, very dysfunctional family experience. So the book starts out with her being shipped off to her aunts on the eastern seaboard of Canada, her aunts who are lesbians and therefore completely hated by her mother and some of her other family members. Not hated, despised. Is there a difference? There's a slight difference. It's still bad. And Ari is going to live with them because her father just committed suicide in front of his daughters, after we quickly learn sexually abusing most of them. And then Ari's mom is one of those parents who thinks that everyone has done her wrong, thinks that her girls were flirts, and she's just a really awful person. She just increasingly gets more and more awful the more I read in this. So you've got that whole background. I'm don't love reading about dysfunctional families when they're this frustrating. I don't love reading about the 1960s. It's not a time period that interests me. But the way that Ari talks about this, the way that she narrates this, the way that Heather Tucker wrote this is just so full of whimsy. It's just lovely. And we have one chapter where something really unjust and really awful happens, and then we have a moment of peace and true family love with the family that Ari has made for herself. So there's a really good balance in here. And every time I think, oh, I don't want to read The Clay Girl anymore, I don't want to pick it up today because awful things are going to happen to Ari, some wonderful, lovely scene, friendship happens, or someone treats Ari like family. So I'm really, really enjoying this at this moment. It's a tough read. It's not as fast of a read as The Lightkeepers, but it is highly, highly worth your time. So these are two books that I managed to read during that BookBuddyAthon, and the one that I am still currently reading and managed to start during that week. I wasn't super proud of how much reading I did in that week, especially compared to the readathons I've done in the past, but my life circumstances have changed quite a bit, and I think I just need to cut myself a little bit of slack. I certainly enjoyed all of the books that I did manage to finish and have started, so that is a bonus in and of itself. So once again, thank you, Acacia, for making me read all of those books. They have been lovely recommendations so far. Thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.